on this side.
Oh, they can't hear the audio. Yeah.
No, that was never an issue. It may will end up that way, but
I think you guys just frustrated. We probably had that so fix the problem.
fix it. Don't make it become my problem. Sure, handle this and I am somewhat.
I think, well, they had a couple of issues. So one is that they couldn't see the screen. Like the whole screen wasn't showing up.
Well, then I don't know.
So when we get up to those slides for that next activity, do you want me to have her hide just this one and leave that one up?
But it's like, okay, I understand.
And you don't have to tell me right now. Just that way, I don't want you to click on it and then be like, what?
Oh, I could click on it and click over it if you want. It doesn't matter.
Or if you're comfortable doing that, we can just
Yeah, I
leave
could
it.
totally-
And then you
yeah.
can just say, for time purposes, we're just going to move forward. Okay, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's fine. I could click over it because we're embedding it right in that next one. Okay.
Had a few vouchers to say.
Except for they have. Is it literally the screen's like getting cut off or?
In Orange County, is they see a child, they take a child. There's no opportunity. Once someone makes an allegation.
Something where you're talking and doing,
I don't know what Carrie's screen.
Yeah, I am aware.
She's on because Carrie's online, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. And I was in my late fifties.
And despite my best
And
efforts,
so
I was
most people,
not able
so
to
she
reach
gave me that encouragement.
Fine. I guess the thing on is getting cut off the screen. The slide is getting cut off the screen. So they've been trying to play with it, but it's a little funky. I don't know what's going on. Do you know why this might be happening with the slide being off the screen?
I don't know.
Yeah, they've been trying to work.
Yeah. So, yeah, because that's what I'm seeing online.
Because I was saying to them that, all of these folks in this room have a copy of the thing, so they could look at it.
To make the pictures
Smaller. They were. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we are going to get this rolling. Is there... Lydia, do you want this on? It's like hard because then I can hear myself. Nope. Okay. Oh, so we can hear them? Okay, so here's what we want to do. Let's bring the room back together.
If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap twice.
All right. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, so I'm really glad y'all are having conversations. That's what this is for. What we're going to do now is we're going to turn to the online and the remote site first and have them share out just kind of the things that they spoke about, and then we're going to turn it to the hub room, and then you all will get to share a little bit about what happened at your tables.
Let's go. We can't hear you.
At all? Oh, no.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, now.
Yeah, better? Okay, great. So do we want to turn to let's do the remote site first in Atascadero.
Can you hear us?
We can.
Woo! Okay. So this is Gwen. I'm going to report out for our whole group. Oh, it's very echoey. So basically the common theme was two people indicated that they wanted to be the help that they desired when they needed help. And so that's what's kept them going. And then we also talked about how helping people and being able to see them be successful is really nice for us to be able to see, because we know that we help them on that track. And just, we talked about key players that maybe brought us along throughout the time that we have worked in this field. And is there anything else?
To see the family successful when we start, or saving?
Yeah, I guess the common thing was to see how families have been so successful with what we've done is what really has kept us going.
Hey Gwen, this is Natalie.
Mm-hmm.
Can you provide one or two examples of how you've been able to recognize that family success?
Yeah, so Sonia was actually telling us that she worked with a family 5 years ago, and they needed resources and needed services. And now 5 years later, they've been able to have a successful career and been able to buy a home and build a home even, and live in a really nice neighborhood and just be very successful. And then also seeing some of the children that we've all worked with be able to grow up and work jobs and be successful, even though they had different situations come against them when they were younger, family things, and now they're working jobs and graduated high school and graduated college even.
Thank you.
Okay, so are there comments from the online participants in the chat window that maybe we could read out on behalf of them, or we can bring them in? Great.
So we have Zoli, who said, I think what has helped me stay engaged in the work is the focus on self-care and having supervisors, mentors that modeled what self-care looked like to me and really encouraged it. What keeps me going is the exciting work that is happening right now. The focus on primary prevention, strategies, and building bridges between different systems to achieve true collaboration. Thank you, Zoli, for your participation.
we're going to have the room share out a little bit from the tables, what you all talked about at your table. So is there a table that wants to go first? Oh, there we go. Can they see that?
Hi, this is Loretta, and I would probably have to say what kept me in the beginning as a child welfare social worker were the families that I worked with, and just the job, the successes, and the challenges that I learned. I believe that, you know, we all can learn from every experience that we partake in. And I would have to say currently what has kept me in now has been Monique, my supervisor. She has been able to give me different perspectives. She's also been able to support me through the challenges of the job and working with individuals. And so I think having that supportive network and having that modeled down to me has been something that's been beneficial and helped kept me in.
Great. Great. Anybody
Who's
else?
next?
Table that one? Oh, over here. Yeah.
All right.
Say who you are so the audience knows who you are.
Hi everyone, this is David. When I spoke to my team, I actually went back a little bit when I first started with DPSS. Oh, sure. I was asked to speak up, sorry. So I'm going back to when I first started with DPSS, a little bit before I started with working under Monique. This mentor came up because he reminds me a lot of Monique, and he retired a couple years ago. But his name was Robert Garofalo, and when he brought me in, I was actually working retail before, and working at this job was totally new to me. But the funny thing about Robert Garofalo is he brought me in because he needed help with computer stuff. He completely didn't know what to do with computer stuff. And he thought because I was young and I was, you know, I might know these things and I might be able to help him with them. Well, that was kind of new to me too. I didn't know Excel as much or Word as much. But what he ended up teaching me was that I could learn it and I could teach it. And I could, from there, it kind of became a regular thing where I learned and taught, learned and taught, and it became my strength, my main strength, which I have today, which is learner. If you guys are familiar with strategies or with Strengths Builder, Strengths Finder. So that's kind of what kept me in, and today it follows me, especially with Monique, who doesn't know anything about computers still to this day. That's my story.
Great story, David. It's a great story.
We're gonna,
All right.
and so when I hand the mic to whoever it is, just reintroduce yourself quickly to the online audience.
Hi, my name is Michelle Kapp. I'm with the system improvement team here in Riverside, and as a group, we kind of touched on I think everyone here, we're in the helping profession because we wanted to make an impact and make a difference in the lives of people within our communities. And you know, it's not an easy thing to do. In particular, oftentimes, and now I'm speaking for myself because I don't want to get these people in trouble. Working in a bureaucracy, you often get frustrated because you can see where the need is and you can see maybe a resource or a potential to fix it, but it's just out of your grasp. And that is just beyond frustrating. And so you need support to get you through those times. And I think having a supervisor or a mentor who is able to trust you, to do the work that you do, and just to kind of untie your hands sometimes and just let you have at it. That's what I have been blessed with working here under leadership from Ray Leonard as well as Liberty Miller. That was probably the changing point in my career, is having people that just trust me to do my job and let me do it. So yeah.
Great.
I'm coming over here, and who wants to do it? Larry?
Seems how it's not even Angel's work day, I guess.
I would speak, but I'm not at work.
So one thing, what we talked about here was the reason everybody got into this field of work. And I think that plays a lot into one of the slides that showed up earlier, was as far as the retention and the burnout. I think you have to find the reason that people have gotten into this line of work to figure out how to keep them in this line of work. I will tell you personally, as far as staying in this line, I'm staying because the work's not done yet. And it's not something where you can ever say, okay, you know, DPSS, child welfare, our work is done, because it'll never be done. Yep. But as far as the FRCs, they're not where they should be yet. We're headed in that direction. So I don't see me leaving right now, because it would be like leaving before the job's done. And that's not going to happen. At least not yet. Yeah, so we'll see after Angel starts tomorrow. Who knows?
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. I think that the conversations, all of the things that you just talked about, are all the conversations that a lot of folks in the state are having, whether FRCs are seated in county offices like it is here, or as their own nonprofits. These are the conversations. So who are the people that brought you in, and then do you become one of those people for someone else? And so it's like lovely that we have someone in the room that someone else named, and the thought that, you know, at some point, some of these folks that you have brought in, Monique, might be those folks for other people. It's just an amazing thought, and that's what we're all striving to do, is to figure out how to become the mentors and the support for the people that will stay in. And even this conversation about, like, I'm not done yet. I love the tenacity of some of our baby boomers. That has what has made some of us who are in the younger generation stay in, is that you have tenacity. And even if you could retire, some folks are like, the work isn't done. And you're absolutely right. We're humans. So this work will never be done in a lot of ways. It's really more about, you know, when is our time and how do we know that? And, you know, those conversations that are also kind of a brew on the other end of folks being able to really get out of the work, even if the work's never going to be finished. So thank you for sharing. Thank you, online and remote site, for also sharing. Let's get into the framework, and I'm going to buzz through this quickly because it does not sound like we have a bunch of rookies in the room, even if you haven't been at your post for very long. And so in On the Verge, the program that I run, it's for emerging leaders in the family strengthening field. We've had other cohorts that have done this same kind of work. But basically, when we talk about our framework, we talk about 3 facets within any individual, and that is the personal, the interpersonal, and professional. And what we believe, and some people are like, whoa, hold on a second. When we talk about the personal, is that part, the purpose of why people showed up to the work, not that we all just want to be helpers, because a lot of us say that as our first kind of knee-jerk reaction. But a lot of it is when you dig deep down, and for some of us it's a dig, and for some of us it's always right there at the surface. These were our families. These were us. And so how do we talk about that and not have that overtake us as professionals, but be part of the story about, like, no, we did this because I was one of these folks, or whatever it is that brings you into the work. And so how do you share that without, like, bleeding into the private? We kind of, like, differentiate what the personal is versus the private, because, you know, there's private information about people's lives, and you don't have to share that as a staff person. You don't want to be doing that with clients or with, you know, other staff or whatever. But the personal is really important. The interpersonal is, how do you play with others? We all have had to figure out, okay, all of us in our own mind think we have the best way to interact with someone else. And then someone else is like, well, not so much. And so how do we continually figure out, through relationships and really through a lot of failure or attempts where it's like, oh, that conversation did not go the way I thought it was going to, or I sent that email and that person came back to me and they totally did not understand what I was trying to say. And how do you continually work on those things? And then the last part is the professional. So what we mean by the professional is, yes, there are hard skills, there are real skills, there are content, there are all kinds of things that have to be imparted to people in our field. And those things are important. But I'm also talking about what's the career trajectory of an individual and how do you incorporate that into what you start to talk about as a supervisor or as a person thinking about, wow, that parent intern, that promotora could run this place in the next 10 years. But then someone's got to be helping to look out for that person for the next 10 years to incrementally give them the opportunities and the time that they need to grow. And so for us, it's really about the things that are listed underneath here. How do you develop and maintain real structures that happen daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, throughout the year to make sure that folks have a chance to think about their integrated development. In our organization, we have 7 initiatives that run different programming around some inequity. So we have emancipated foster youth that run at an emancipated foster youth center where emancipated foster youth come and get services for housing and education and all kinds of things. So how does this look for a 22-year-old emancipated foster youth as a staff person to continually understand themselves through these 3 lenses? And who is the supervisor who's working with that young person to make sure they're kind of looking out for them long term? You know, the second thing is that it's time over time. So again, it's that yearly, you know, however your fiscal, your program year runs, but then it's also over how many years could we help support this one individual, whether, again, they're like a manager or someone who's a direct line staff, to keep on learning. And then the last piece is that learning, in my mind, is real learning when there's risk involved. There's innovation, meaning things can't just stay the same all the time. And there's also potential for failure. So when we run our groups, a lot of times people are like, don't say the F word. I use the other F word a lot, by the way. I won't for y'all. But the F word they're talking about usually is failure. There are a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't do failure. I'm like, oh, honey, you do failure. Everybody does. They should. And they should look at it and say, okay, if I don't fail, then am I really learning anything, right? That is we're people, so that's the way we learn how to do things. And if there's not a person or a structure or a way to kind of look back at that failure and take it apart in a constructive way, we're going to miss the mark. And so how do you facilitate that happening for, again, individuals, but also your staff groups, and then also for participants that are participating in programs? So it's really at all these different levels. And again, for an emerging leader to be like, it's okay to fail, sometimes that just breaks open this whole nother conversation, right? Like, how many times have you had a staff person sobbing in your office after you said, wow, that didn't go so well? And they're just like, blah, like, it didn't. And they just were waiting for somebody to say to them, it's okay, like, you're gonna have some of these happen. And again, I know that some of you are coming from the child welfare side, so, you know, failure in that world can be really catastrophic. But for some of us that are running program at a program level, those failures need to be looked at so that we can better our systems and better our staff people. So yeah, I'm gonna try to click through some of these things. So I wanted to talk about On the Verge, and I want to figure out if we could figure out how to incorporate that in some other time today. But basically, our program, just as an example, is a contained environment for a year to do this with emerging leaders either in one place. So in a place like Riverside, a room like this could be a On the Verge cohort where you come together and there's very specific meetings and all of that. You know, we use community development models really to help facilitate a learning process. But again, it's contained, it's 12 months, and it's lovely. I love it. I went through the program myself in 2004. And, you know, my biggest selling point, if you will, to communities is not necessarily about buying On the Verge and having a cohort. I mean, I love that, and we need to do that. OCAP is funding it, so whoops, you know, hopefully they don't, you know, cut me for this. But I feel like the thing that I'm really hoping to inspire for communities and people in terms of this work is not the cohort-based model. It is one way to help facilitate this learning, but it's really about how do you, as either staff people who are managing other staff people or direct service staff that are thinking about your families and your participants, how are you thinking about a way to develop them so that they have the tools and the strategies and the abilities to do things for themselves. So I love what you said, Michelle, about, you know, the best thing a supervisor ever did was to say, okay, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust that if you don't know, that you're going to come talk to me about it. You know, that, you know, we give folks the freedom to be able to try some stuff out on their own. And I think that's one of the biggest things, again, that we want to, you know, I don't know about impose, but talk about with communities is that how do you slow down time, take the time to think, reflect, and be together to be able to then speed up and do the programming that you want to do. But in order to do that, you have to invest in time to be able to help folks think about these deeper things that might be happening. So again, we may talk more about On the Verge, we may not, but that's the model that we use is a contained model. So I'm going to round out this time by talking about who is an emerging leader. Any ideas? Shout outs? We are. And when we started our program for On the Verge many years ago now, we really were looking at young leaders, 20-somethings to 30-something-year-olds. And then some of us got old, like me, and we're like, well, we still don't know. We still don't know how to do this really well. And so how do we keep the conversation going around, you know, not just the age part, because really an emerging leader can be any age, but also those of us who are seeking out opportunities for growth and development and advancement sometimes. You do not have to be on the ED trajectory to be an emerging leader. I think that has been one of the ways that we've differentiated how we think about programming differently than other leadership development programs, is that we don't want to just take on people who are aiming to be an executive director or like the top dog. And then, you know, the other piece to think about is who are the folks in your offices who are getting the opportunities. So the time to sit in this room. This is an opportunity. If for nothing else, it gets you out of the office. You get a little bit of respite. You get a little bit of time to think. You get a little bit of time to spend with your colleagues who you really like. But it's an opportunity. And who are you extending those to? And at what level, and at what levels does it make sense to bring in your line staff, and at what levels does it not? And then the last piece is there may be unusual suspects that just kind of hide out for whatever reason. Again, a lot of that personal starts to creep in. For us, we've seen a lot of success. So we were in the Central Valley. We worked with folks in Fresno for the last 3 years now. And there was one woman who, during her interview with us, was asked the question, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? Just like a pretty basic, you know, interview question, but it was for On the Verge. It was for a program. And she like started crying on the phone. And the coach who was interviewing her was like freaking out, like, oh God. That was not a hard, like it wasn't a heavy question, but she basically said, no one has asked me where I might be in 5 years. I have been in the same position for 10 years, doing the same thing year after year. And I don't know what I want to do in 5 years because I just feel like I'm going to be here forever. And so, you know, it took a lot of like cajoling to get her to say that. But it was one of those things where I was like, oh my goodness, you know, we are working really hard. So it wasn't at the fault of her supervisor. It's just like, okay, this is what happens. But for her, even being asked that question and then actually having to answer it was the way to say, okay, this woman probably is not going to self-initiate and say, hey, look at me, I'd like to get a promotion, or I'd like to figure out where to go next. And for us, it's about how do we start at that starting place with her. And then for each of you, it will be a different starting place. Some of you might be like, I'm going. You know, I can ask my supervisor, whatever. But for her, it wasn't. So how do you kind of suss out some of those unusual suspects? And again, think about the participants that you have who are becoming interns, all of those good things. So are there questions? Because we're now going to move on to the more strategies and practices. Are there questions from the online or the? All right, let's do it. So you have a little worksheet, a couple of little worksheets. I was a teacher, so sorry for some of you that are like, okay, whatever, worksheets. But, you know, for me, when I take notes of these things, oftentimes they just end up in the garbage because then I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking when I was doing this? So you have the slides in front of you, which are also helpful for some of us that need like the lines to write on. But we also have this thing that says practices and strategies for developing emerging leaders. And each in each of those, I put the major headers so that you could take some notes and also think about your own strategies and practices that may resonate with some of this that we're talking about. Okay. And then online and remote sites, they also have these materials, correct? Great. Okay, so the first thing to talk about is collaboration. So in our world, again, no matter if we're working with emancipated foster youth or emerging leaders as staff people, with collaboration, we want to know that there's some common goal and body of work. That's pretty like self-explanatory. Like if we're coming together, but it's like just to come together, that's nice, but a lot of times it will not drive real things to happen. So there's got to be a reason to have the collaboration. Again, one of the things that we stress, and you might have heard me just say this a couple minutes ago, but we do call our facilitators and our programs coaches, and there's a reason for that. So back long ago in the 90s, when we were working with our nonprofit organization with high school students, we had a person with very unusual skill set. He was a psychotherapist, family and marriage, therapist, and then also had Olympic coaching as one of his things. Like he helped pole vaulters do the pole vault. It was just like a weird combination of stuff. He was also an expert at organizational development. We often refer to him as Yoda. So if you hear me saying that, it's not the green guy from Star Wars. It's actually this man. And the way he thought of how we were going to then interact with young people, but also our staff, was with this athletic model. So when he said coaching, it wasn't like we're literally football coaches, but we were a little bit. And so he taught us to think about people and the teams that we were putting together with that metaphor in mind, because for some of us, it made it easier to understand like what's really our role. If you're a coach, you can't go out in the field and play for the athlete. It doesn't happen. Steve Kerr does not go suit up with Steph, okay? Sorry, I'm Bay Area, so I'm like, go Warriors. It doesn't happen. He doesn't do that. I'm sure he wants to sometimes. I'm sure he's like, get off that court, I could do this better, but he doesn't do it. And so how do we hold ourselves sometimes as the person who's on the sideline yelling, going crazy, or sitting down, looking at our notes, trying to figure out what to do next, but not go in and do it for people? Because that doesn't help anybody learn how to be different in this work. And so working on teams is one of our biggest things that we're imparting on our staffs and in our On the Verge groups. If you look at one of the handouts that was provided, there's this little triangle. One of the things that we've used is this guy, Patrick Lencioni, wrote a book a while back now called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a really easy read because it's a fictional story that he made up about a dysfunctional team in a work context. You don't have it? Oh no. Oh no. Okay, so on the back of this guy is these links, and we will email them to you, because when you click on the link, hopefully it's going to take you right to this handout. And I'll pass it around right now. Oh my gosh, would you? That'd be awesome. Thank you, Monique. I really appreciate that. So this whole 5 dysfunctions of a team really starts to spell out how do you really develop a team. And again, it thinks about the interplay between the personal and interpersonal. It's not just all about setting goals and all of that stuff. Some of it's about that, but a lot of it, and the bulk of it that we've taken, is that if the way he presents it is that setting up a team is a triangle. At the very bottom, the foundation of it has to be trust. There's nothing else. And if you don't put that in as a foundational piece, nothing else can get built up. So for a lot of us, we've been in those teams either cross-organizationally or within our organizations where, things are fine and you walk away from the meeting being like, okay, that's fine, whatever, I got my to-dos or whatever it is. But if you don't know who's around that table, and again, you don't have to know every deep, dark secret about them, but if you don't have some real human trust going on in some of those rooms, the work's just not going to be as good. It will maybe be fine, but it won't be as excellent as we want it to be. And part of it is, if we don't have trust, we have no way to say, hey, I don't know if I agree with what you said right now. Or we all said we were going to do that thing on Friday, and it's Tuesday, and it's still not done. So what's up? Where did it go? And some of those conversations for some of us are easy. For some of us, conflict or tension is like, like stay away, danger, danger. And so how do you work in time for people to understand who everyone around the table is to be able to build that trust is super important. Goes to the group learning dynamics as well. How do you slow down a process as a group goes to be able to speed it up? And then what are the actual structures that are put in place to hold people accountable, but also to support people to get the stuff done? You know, it is not our favorite thing to have to say out loud to people who are grown-ups, hey, did you get that thing done? But you all know it has to happen. We all have a million things, and things fall through the cracks all the time. So, you know, with the use of like Google and Dropbox and all those amazing tools, some of that, this is where technology I think has been really helpful, because then you can share documents, you can do things in real time. We use Google Drive to nauseam. People are like, oh, the Google Drive. But it's really helpful because you can literally see what's happening in real time. So if you haven't started using some of those tools, that might be where our friend David may come in handy. I don't know if he, yeah, anyway. Second thing is really about this co-creation of a learning organization. And so how many of you have heard about learning organizations, done anything around them? Yes, I see head nods and some hands raised. So a real learning organization is going to have a very specific and articulated culture. Culture meaning, you know, what are the different ways that we share language and practices and values that are real? For us, there is a few tenets for our culture that are underlying everything. So being okay with asking for help is one. Vulnerability is another one. This is why I can share, like, you know, someone is going to fire me. Like, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem crying in front of people and facilitating and then just jumping right back into facilitation. But a big part of that was being able to have the opportunity to get coached on how do you be vulnerable and then be able to come back into the space and just be okay and be yourself. If any of you are interested in that, we found a great tool this last couple of years that we've used with people, and it's not on the form. I totally forgot about it, but it's Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. How many of you have seen that TED Talk or read the book? She is, number one, she's just a person. She's a real person who has a very, you know, amazing skill set and has done a lot of research, but she's just a real person. And so if you bring up that TED Talk on YouTube, because it's, you know, it's free, you don't have to like buy it or anything. There's one around listening for shame or about shame. And that one is our go-to one to talk to people about, like, what is this vulnerability thing you speak of? And, you know, what does it look like in practice? And how is it a useful practice for, you know, folks that are in our field? So love her.
And so I'm making a note of links to send out to everybody.
Awesome.
Feel free if anybody else thinks of something.
Yeah.
Right now.
Awesome. Last couple of things for this area, really clear structures that are agile. I know I'm talking to county people, so I know your structures are not always agile. So I know that's not very, you know, it's kind of cruel to be saying that. And I think there's a way, you know, that I've seen in other county organizations that, you know, I think it depends on the leader. I think it depends on if you have people that are paying attention to where is it that people want to go and migrate. I mean, it's interesting to me that you have the FRCs seated in your county as part of your county offices. It's just very unique. But for us in the nonprofit world, we're really, you know, our organization tends to try to make things so that, like my business cards, they don't even have my title on it. Why? Because tomorrow my title may change. And those of us that have been there for a long time, we're okay with that. We're like, the work is where the work is, and wherever I'm gonna best facilitate my best work is where I'm gonna go. And that could mean I'm cleaning the toilet tomorrow, and it could mean that I'm coaching a young person in the same day. And it's fine. I'm the one who has to go grocery shopping when we do, you know, our cohort work. Like it's what it is. And so part of our system of thinking about learning is also about, like, okay, people have to wear different hats to be able to do this.
Stay flexible.
Absolutely. So last piece is, how do you ensure that there's time for these conversations around reflection, learning, failure at every level of the organization, everywhere from your participants who are probably getting, I hope, a lot of it, but all the way up to the executive director or your directors. How are you making sure that folks don't have a sense of like, oh, I've arrived. I'm all done learning. I'm cool. Like, no, I'm sorry. we're all going to learn until we're not here anymore on this planet. And so how do we set up real ways to have that happen where they're safe for people to share, like, this stuff's really hard, or, let's problem solve and let's talk about what we don't do well. So one of the pieces that you might see in your, oh gosh, it's not there. Ooh, keep thinking it's there. It's not there. It's a link. Oh, it is there. Oh, that one is there. Oh, fascinating. Okay, no problem. So again, the organization I used to work for is called Alternatives in Action. It's a youth development organization seated now in Oakland. And this process is a process that when I started with the organization, they held this process for 3 hours every Friday afternoon. So they would shut the door. They'd be like, all the young people had to get out of the building. We had a facilitator, Yoda. Yoda came, floated to our space, and facilitated a 3-hour process to do this exact thing. So we did this process called check-in. Then there would be open space with maybe some questions and pushing and dialogue and coaching. And then there were acknowledgments at the end, time to say thank you and gratitude and all those things. The biggest piece about it is that it wasn't time to talk shop. It was not like, that event didn't go so well, and let's figure out why only 10 people showed up. It was more about, oh, that event didn't go so well and only 10 people showed up. What's going on for people in that? And it's not about problem solving or trying to rethink the event. It was about, people are going to talk to me about why I didn't do the flyers. That's why 10 people didn't show up. And then I might have to say, well, my part of that was this. And then people would say, well, what happened? Why didn't you make the flyer? And again, it's not about trying to problem solve, but it's a time for people to sit and really reflect and figure out, like, what's going on for me emotionally, what's going on for me in my head, in my thinking, and specifically in critical thinking. And then if we could help support those two conversations to happen simultaneously, feeling and thinking, then maybe we can actually get the work to be more effective. Often there's a lot of us that are wired to do it one or the other, but not always integrated. So some of us are very cerebral. That's how I started off in this process. My parents are obviously Asian. They're like, feelings? What? What are you talking about? Don't bring those to work. Keep them, somewhere in the car if you need them, and then go run into the car and shut yourself in there and cry, whatever. Don't show people that you have feelings, please. Especially the sad ones, the mad ones, all of those things, right? And so I had to learn really fast how to figure out how to show them and then not have them overtake me, and then also how to use them as a way to facilitate my best self. And that is a life, I am not there. I'm like, whoa, this is hard. So for some of us, that's not a problem. For whatever reason, we can do that. We don't have a problem saying like, wow, that makes me really mad that you said that to me, and maybe we're gonna have a conversation in 2 days or whatever. Some of us, we're like, oh, I'm gonna go do things, and we don't stop to necessarily think about like, wait a minute, if I do that, what's gonna happen over here? And we're seeing a lot with our millennial generation, not to say that it's a generational thing, but I don't know, it might be. The critical thinking part, it oftentimes is a little, I don't know, it's lacking. Thank you. Let's just be real. So people will be like, well, I thought you wanted me to make this flyer on the da-da-da. And you're like, that flyer looks crazy. Like, no one can read it. What were you thinking exactly? And asking what you're thinking is not helpful. That's not helpful. People are like, huh? So again, how do you support a process to get people to be okay with like articulating the way they think and how they feel, and then getting challenged a little bit about it? Like, really, do you have to think about it that way? Because all of us already have embedded values about where we come from, how we think, how we, share all those things. And so this is really about how do you break those things down and make it transparent so then other people can have a way in to help support both the feeling and the thinking. Again, 3 hours every Friday, that's a big investment in time. We were a nonprofit, we could do that. Now we're down to like an hour and a half every month with staff. Oh yeah. And as an introvert, that was like hell. And I am an introvert. So I was like, oh my God, please don't call on me to talk. And it's not one of those, so you don't have to get called on to talk. But it was awful. I would be like, please, nobody see me in this. And there's like 11 people sitting around the circle. So it's not like this big old room full of folks. So it's tough. But there's ways to modify this practice. We really stand by this practice. We've done it in child welfare departments before, and it's heavy. It's really heavy. When a kid dies and then you go in for reflection, you could sit in that room for 2 days and people are not going to feel okay, and that's what it is. And so this has been a really interesting tool to use kind of across organizations just to figure out how to give people that time and space to process.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting that you brought that up, because we're going back to that model.
Wow.
So if we have a critical incident, we're gonna have a big meeting, and it's gonna be with the big top boss.
Yeah. All the way down
all
to
the way
your
down
caseworkers.
to
Yep.
the caseworker.
Yep.
So that's interesting you brought that. So a few of my hairs went up when you said that.
Oh gosh. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm an FRZ. No critical incidents here, I hope.
Yeah. And I have to say, one of the things about doing this too is how do you do it in the non-critical incidences? Yes.
I have to go back to this. So you see, you're bringing up some real things
Oof.
here. I was called in to participate, you could say, a focus meeting about this. I said, this is a perspective from the workforce.
Yep.
No matter how you put it, you're going to intimidate them. There's no way they're going to not feel that they did something wrong. There's nothing you can bring to the table that's not going to tell them you did it wrong. Okay. I mean, there's nothing that's going to prevent from someone in the room saying, well, what if?
Yeah.
I said, because, from the group I handled, it was a unit that worked mainly from 3 to 1. I've told my folks on the way over here, it really was a 3 to 3 in the morning or a 3 to 5 in the morning, and then carry on to the next day. So, these folks are expected to make decisions, very little lack of sleep.
Right.
Through a lot of channels. Then they're the ones being questioned. So I said, it's kind of late to question them. This was vetted through several channels before the decision was made. It's just their names on that report.
Yep.
So, you can call me in and I will be okay. You can tell me what I did wrong, and that's okay. A lot of people have told me what I do wrong, so that's okay. So I just try to even it out when they don't. I keep track of my own stuff.
And again, if you want to bring it back to the the larger topic that we're at, creating a learning organization. Can't hear me. It's on. Oh, okay. Creating a learning organization is rough in a government entity because you have, a division, right? But it's seated under usually some kind of executive director or what have you. And so that is one of the things that would be really interesting to look at in terms of an organizational development, piece is like, well, what is your, top dog, whoever's the head of, I don't know if it's split up between health and human services, but how on board are they with that concept of having the county become that? And what things do you go to bat for and what do you not go to bat for, And so I think in child welfare, it's a very specific thing that's happening. That's only happening because something bad is happening. And that is what's so hard about that. And I think, again, like if you are a staff person who's looking out for your staff, then how do you put some of these things in place, not to make it like better, but make it palatable, make it so that folks do have that way to be able to have a conversation that's at a human level for them, to just say it out loud, whatever it is, like, what if I did do this, or what if I didn't do this? And there's no answer for it because there's no answer to these really hard questions.
At an emotional level. At an emotional level, no one's going to probably feel it more than the worker.
Right.
I understand the other factors that have to play in, but at an emotional level, to call in a person when they're dealing with that, trauma, thank you. You know, it's very difficult to talk to them there.
Of course.
And, you know, you may be able to talk to some people. You know, it's the same when we go out, you know, to a homicide, to where a child has been critically injured. You know, it's very hard to speak to some folks.
Right.
You know, some will talk to you, some will cuss you out,
Yep.
some will cry, you know, some will touch you.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so it's to me it was just, you know, case by case. There's just some folks that are not humanly prepared
To be able to have
to
that.
have this meeting.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
so.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we're. How are we doing? I know. It's good though. It's real. It's real.
I just wanted to say, I think what's important here, and you mentioned it earlier, is trust as the foundation. So it goes amongst our coworkers, it goes within the organizations. I think that, I mean, is really the foundation. When I look at this can't occur unless you guys have
That's right.
trust.
That's right.
So, I mean, not everybody can do it. I think we have to get to that level of trust first in order for this to be successful. So.
Yeah. I mean, the other way to think about trust building, and again, you know, we are constantly learning about this, is if the risk doesn't get taken, then trust may never get built. So in order to have trust, sometimes you have to be risking whether or not I'm going to be able to trust one individual, 10 individuals, what have you. And so to say, okay, we're going to wait till there's trust built, you can't do it in a vacuum. It has to be done. And I would imagine in something, a department like a Child Protective Services, that those teams are going to be wired very differently than some of the other teams. And again, because they're working on things that are extra critical, and some of our FRCs are the same way. It's like, they're not going to build trust by having these like 2-hour meetings about like, what are you feeling? It's more like, I am going to help my, you know, colleagues serve this family that's not, you know, has no food in their cabinet. And how are we going to do that? And then talk to the school about why the kid's acting out in class and all of those things that happen. And so how do you help to articulate where people may already have some of that built? Because sometimes in their mind, the word and the things that happen to get built into that word don't actually match up. They're like, oh, for me to trust somebody, this, and this need to happen. It's like, maybe. But even challenging folks to think about, what would it mean to really trust someone at work? Is different than say, like, I trust this person with my life. And whatever, I have colleagues who I'm like, I do trust them with my life. We've gone through some heinous stuff together about things that happen between humans. And so if I had to, you know, put my bets on somebody who was going to be there for me, I'd be naming a lot of people who I work with. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to try things and then say, oh, that didn't work out so good with that individual. And even then, how do I take one more step in with that individual to say, let me try again? You know, I'm not here with bad intention or whatever it is. It's hard. It's hard. It's a real human thing. And I often see that a lot of times the way these things don't go in is because people aren't necessarily ready to take the first, the second, the third step in. Because again, if your emotion and your thinking is not tied together, one or the other is going to run us in a way that's maybe not that productive for the work. So yeah. Let's turn it over to you. I feel like I've just been yapping. Thank you for sharing, because it makes me feel like, okay, here I am, not alone. Last piece, environment where the whole individual is considered. So again, someone already said it. I think Larry said it. Individual's connection to purpose. How do you suss that out? How is that articulated to them in their own mind? How do you have it shared on a team of people where that is appropriate? And so one of the things we're going to come back to after lunch is doing this life map activity that we've done with many of our staff people and participants in On the Verge. It's a pretty simple activity, but it kind of gets to the point. The last piece is, do we take our staff people out of the environment that they're in on a daily basis to then learn about each other in a different environment? Sometimes literally just saying, like, we are going to go to somebody's house over here and have a potluck, but also have a meeting, changes the whole tone of what happens. People are different in different settings, and you know, it's not magic. It's just called change the environment, and maybe things will feel a little different. So let's turn it over to you, and then online and remote site same. share the things that you are doing in your own agencies to support emerging leaders. What has been effective for you as a person that does this work in terms of your own development? Think about different models or programs or things that you've gone through where you're like, I see a lot of head nodding in this room. So where did you get those values and things instilled in you? There have to be either, again, leaders and or things that you've done already that have promoted some of these same ways of thinking. And so talk a little bit about that. If you want to talk about strategies that you utilize within your organizations, that would be great. And then we're going to turn it back to, the room to then report out on what you said before we go to lunch. Okay? So just take a few minutes to talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll start calling on folks to produce the list.
Okay, so
like they said that in ML. It's because the moderator so I went to lead
they need to know what services are there so they can refer people.
was basically her and so it was a very good conversation. And I had to wait our departure so that I wasn't like I just concentrate on yeah, but I like it. Yeah. Can you look at the chat? The ocean issue was that
so much on the and that made me more interested than I didn't want to do. You know, yeah, and it's like, wow, okay, and I all right, you know, there might be one missing. You know what I mean? Like, no, I didn't want that. All right. You know, like, I don't know what people see it like. Yeah. You know, it's good for everybody to recognize, okay, this person, well, it didn't have been the most. I don't think we went. I'm also skeptical. However, I can see this when they had that so I wrote that I knew where I had to go to the training. So I distributed this with cross-section of arrogance together, because we all have to, but that's what everyone has a bad. And you weren't doing anything else. This has changed, and I do mean this from the very top, at least people that really understand. There's a but it's not just amongst friends, but it's all about it was
All right. I am really aware of the time. I know that people are chattering, but we also want to make sure we get you fed. We want to feed you some lunch and give you a break. Almost there. Huh? Good. You should. You got a big job. You got to eat. Got to eat. Oh. Oh, goodness. Okay, let's bring the room back together. I'm going to do like quiet coyote.
You can hear my voice, clap twice.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so I'm going to take a cue from Natalie or Lisa or Carrie. Should we have people share now? Should we wait till after lunch? I just want to make sure. I'm very aware that it's 12:02, and so what do folks think? Share? Okay, so let's share. Are there any online chat comments that we could read out?
No online chat
Alrighty.
comments, but we want to hear your voice, so please let us know.
All right, so Atascadero, are they still there or did they scatter? Did they scatter for lunch? Atascadero, if you're there, it'd be great to hear from you first, just so we can give you that time.
Yes, we are still here. Yes.
All right.
So, we have a lot of things going on in SLO County that help emerging leaders. And I mean, specifically at the Link and CFS, we have Lisa, who is a huge encourager of growth and bringing other leaders up. We also always are encouraged to do the learning communities and to participate in Strategies 2.0, which help the professional development. In SLO County, we also have ELAC and PTA that help parents come into more of a leadership role. Professionally, we have staff development and professional development offered, internal promotions at a lot of the organizations here, so we promote within rather than looking for outside people. And then we have SAFE, which Sonia has mentioned SAFE, which brings all of our leaders to one table to help families in need. We have outreach collaboration, and so the collaboration is really key to help emerging leaders. And that is the basis of what we had.
Gwen,
and from a Taurus.
Gwen, this is Lisa. Can you please quickly share with a group what SAFE is?
Yes. Do you want to share?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So SAFE is Services, Agencies, Family, and Empowerment. SAFE.
I can take that.
So
what we do in SAFE, I'm Sonia, the family advocate. What we usually do in SAFE, we bring a family, they have a really high risk to try to connect it with every agency partner. Comes with CWS, the Department of Social Service, and mental health as needed. Any other ones? So that's how we collaborate with the other agency leaders.
Thank you, Sonia. It's so good to hear your voice.
I bet you.
That's Sonia. She's a family advocate that's done this work since 2005.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have folks in the room here at the hub share. So do we want to go table by table, or we don't need to? But if there's other things that your table talked about in terms of models, programs, or other kinds of spaces that your agency is hosting, we'd love to hear what you talked about.
Who wants to jump in first? Angel?
Guess it's our turn, right? Table?
Yes.
All right. So we talked about more of how we could support the staff and finding out their own strengths, finding out what they could do, even if it is leaving us, because that's typically, there's not a lot of opportunity that our staff can enjoy at the FRC. So if the staff are trained, they're probably going to be picked up or move on to something different, and that's okay, because we want them to grow. So, and it's okay that we act as a coach and inspire them to move forward, whatever that may be, even if it is a revolving door and we have to train new staff, especially our staff that, covers the front. I've heard from both that typically the new staff, they develop quickly because they have to learn quickly the resources so they can assess the clients that keep coming in. So once they develop a certain expertise and what's out there, they may decide, why am I here? And that's okay. And it's our job to encourage them to grow, even if it's out of FRC. So.
Okay.
Other things the room wants to share about what you talked about at your table?
Hi, this is Tiffany. What we discussed was staff development is offering an emerging leader course now. They just discussed it at one of our biannual all staff meetings that we have. And David also mentioned the all staff meeting in itself being something to develop us into being leaders. It gives us opportunities to learn about things we don't know. Some of us are not social workers, so there's things that we're learning while we're there. Then we also talked about self-care trainings. I forgot your name. From OCAP, she mentioned a 52-week course of self-care that's offered at one of the counties that you were doing a report on.
CBC. It's actually a curriculum that is on the CBC website, but I was mentioning the fact that it's 52 weeks, so that's why I haven't found a county that is actually using that course.
California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse.
Yeah, we just find out.
And then also CEBC is the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse. And then also we talked about there's mentoring programs and shadowing programs that our staff development department is offering.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is Kim, and we actually talked about the Strength Finders initiative that our division has started utilizing, and how we are identifying various strengths from all of our staff and recognizing the fact that the leadership comes in at every level. And so our manager has taken a different approach, particularly with our clerical staff, where they get an opportunity to share in the planning, share in different initiatives, and talk with her on a regular basis as they see fit about any ideas that they have. And so that's actually created a lot of I would say motivation from and creativity from our staff. So just in a short amount of time, a lot of them that you wouldn't normally have heard from, even the ones that are probably very quiet, we're finding out that they have ideas, they have thoughts, and it's good to hear.
Yep. Yep. That's right. All right. Our last table. Do they want to?
Are you? We're going to another table here.
Thanks. So my Lita Albright with Strategies. So in my role with a staff of 6, one of the ways that I encourage emerging leadership is to one of the way I encourage leadership among the team is to actually what I call it is just take them a little bit outside of their comfort zone and work with them until they're comfortable with it. And then I've seen, especially in one case with one of my staff who took something that was very difficult for her in the beginning, which she thought, and that has now just kind of run away with it because I saw that strength in her and took her outside of her comfort zone, and so it's now her own. And that's what I look for, those strengths in others that they may not see, and then try to find an opportunity for them to move into it.
Thank you. So go ahead.
This is Natalie Stetz. So I'm a proud AmeriCorps alum along with Carrie Collins. And for me, that 11-month program was an incredible leadership development opportunity, exposed me to a lot and gave me a lot of opportunity to practice everything you've been sharing about ETSCO. Working with groups, processing through stuff, taking initiative, et cetera, et cetera.
And I want to close, this is Lisa Fraser, with this. In San Luis Obispo County, we launched what we call a Promotores program. When I say Promotores, are we on board with that? And what we've discovered is that those folks that join us grow into roles that we didn't anticipate. We have now 3 of our Promotores are becoming what we call parent coaches, becoming certified in a curriculum like active parenting or positive parenting, and taking that into their communities. And also, I'm going to talk about our child welfare services in San Luis Obispo County launched last year a parent partner concept. When I say parent partner, you have them as well. Great. And that is a great way to bring people along. So when I'm here, I'm thinking about our constituents, our community, our folks that are not necessarily employed in the systems or the services, but how are we engaging those folks who have used services and bringing them along to be part of this approach that we call family resource centers in our county. So let's go. Shall I close it out? Okay. So online participants, Atascadero and Riverside, we are ready to step into our lunch hour or 40 minutes. And please use this time to sit with somebody that you don't typically sit with. I know that's a little challenging, but maybe you guys all know each other, but I'm going to ask myself, I'm going to ask my colleagues that are here today to please sit with other folks at the table today and get to know each other a little better. And we'll see you at, let's see, what time? What time am I going to see? At 1:45 or 12:45? 12:45? All right, that's 30 minutes. So in the back of the room, we've got 3 stacks of boxes of ham sandwiches, turkey sandwiches, and veggie. There's tea and lemonade. I think everybody found the restroom. I apologize for not announcing earlier, but it's in the hallway directly across from the back doors. And thank you. And there's
Yes, we are here. We only have 2 people right now. Sonia had to step out and Nancy had an open house she had to go to.
Come on. Come on in. Oh, yes. Thank you for coming back. All right. I can see we have a couple people that are still out. We're all ready for you guys. So all right. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. And we're going to just start this. I see there's some missing folks, but we're going to shame them when they come back in because we're going to get to work. All right. All right, Tiffany's back. We can start. All right. So I want to just check in with the lunch. Everybody enjoyed their lunch, I hope. And those of us that are back in Atascadero and other communities online, I hope you enjoyed the break. But what we're going to do, we've reshuffled our agenda just a teeny bit. So we're going to bring ETSCO back in for our next part of the day. And then we'll be closing out the day with some follow-up on what's next for our learning communities. So, and on top of that, I just want to thank everybody for coming in and taking a moment, your time to change your perspective a little bit and observe. And we want to encourage you to not so much think about what you're going to do after this day tomorrow. I know it's Angel's first day on the job. Oh, tomorrow. But we really want to encourage you to come back to work with a lens of observation, not so much of a doer, not so much of an action maker, but really an observer of what it is that you've gained from today and how you'll shift your thinking and your leadership in your own departments. I just wanted to close with that, and then I'm just going to let ETSCO take lead here, and here we go.
So before lunch, you all had a chance to really think about, again, like what is emerging leadership? Who might those people be? And then some of the strategies, the activities, the opportunities that, may help create some of those gap fillers and meet some of the challenges that emerging leaders have. And that all of us, I'm sure, have faced in our time, in our careers as well. And so we heard a lot of good stuff from folks about what already is happening out there for you in your organizations and in other places in the community. And so we wanted to bring this other question back that we were actually going to start with this morning that we didn't have a chance to. And again, with Lisa's prompting around observation, we were talking, right before lunch ended about what happens when we kind of shift our lens, even just a little bit. And, if your lens is shifting, like I don't have glasses, I probably need them, but I don't, then if you're changing prescriptions or whatever, it might take you a couple of days or an hour or whatever it takes you to like literally be like, where am I? Am I in this room? Or, am I seeing double or whatever it is? And so give yourself that little bit of time to soak in what you got here, even if you're like, I don't know if I agree with that. Just sit with that for a second to be able to then think about like, okay, well, how can I maybe look at some of these folks that are in, my squad or the work that we're doing in terms of developing people? How can I just shift it a little bit? And maybe I would even shift my thinking about who those folks are, given what we've talked about today. You all have the knowledge in the room, so it's not like something completely novel or brand new, but just a different kind of shifting a little bit. And so the question we want to start you off with after lunch so that you engage with each other and not so much about me talking is, who are literally the folks that you're thinking about as emerging leaders? I was having a conversation the back of the room with Monique, and it reminded me about, because I've heard in different ways throughout today about, people are who are our participants, or parents becoming leaders, and I am all for that. That is what our organization does. But I also urge you to remember that in the line of work that we're in, a lot of times as staff people, we think that folks are fine because they landed here in this business. And, I think we were reminded by Angel about, even if they're not seeing the worst of the worst trauma, which child welfare oftentimes is seeing, staff are going through a lot of things in having to bring on the kind of situations that are going on for families. And oftentimes we just kind of think, okay, they're okay unless they say something. And I just don't find that to be true in the work that I've done. And in fact, it's been kind of a big gap in our whole field, is that I think oftentimes we are looked at as the experts. And yes, we have content knowledge, we have resources, we have ways to access these things for our folks, for the participants that are coming in, but staff need a lot to be able to continue to do this. So I urge you not to just jump into like, oh, how can we do this for community members and da-da-da. Yes, that is all good. We want that to happen. But today's topic was really about how to ensure you're also looking at the staff and the people that are right there with you all the time, and even maybe yourself. Again, I went through the process in 2004 in this very contained program. And then in 2015, I was just coming back from my second maternity leave. I had a son, and at 3 months, I was like, smell you later, Tomas, have a good time at daycare, which is great for me because I was a working woman, had worked more years than being a mom, just like really knew how to work, did not know how to be a mom so much. And it was really painful also to be like, oh God, I just dropped off my 3-month-old son at daycare. Like, this was not what I signed up for. And I walked right into an On the Verge cohort that was full of women who are in their mid-careers, just like me, who are struggling with all those same things about like, wait a minute, how do I do this? Like, this is a huge juggling act. Some of them single moms, some of them partnered moms who felt like single moms, some of them partnered wishing they weren't partnered. I mean, just all the things you can imagine people going through to both be in their own family and then serve families. And so it reminded me, and it continues to remind me, because that is the way we ended up getting into this family strengthening arena, really, was by this group of women saying to us, you can't just look at young people or people that haven't been in the field for a long time. You've got to be looking out at like all the levels to ensure that people are continually reminding themselves and their staff to learn, develop, and get the support they need to do this work. Many of them were like, I'm ready to go like tomorrow, and they're 45. They can't go tomorrow and retire. It is not financially feasible. And so, for them, this contained space was very important. For some of you, that's not going to be possible. You just don't have that luxury. You don't have the resources, the money to do it, whatever it is. And so how do we take the things you talked about today and kind of, place them in a way that makes sense for where you're at, where your program's at, where your community's at, where your staff are at? And so there's really kind of three main questions. Who are the emerging leaders that you want to focus in on, invest in, spend time with, make sure they get developed? What are the challenges that you're seeing, the barriers that they kind of have, the gaps that they need to get filled? What are the strengths? Don't forget the strengths. The strengths are important. And then the last question is really the how. So again, there's kind of these categories. Some of us, I am not remembering your name right now. Tiffany was talking about there's an emerging leadership program that's offered to her through, the county. And so for some of us, contained environment spaces are important because we learn well in them. For some of us, we're like, I don't have time for that. I don't want to do that. And so how do you utilize things that are already going on in the organization to the best of your ability, and also push your staff people to do that if that's the things that are available to them? And so think about the categories of how. Again, contained environment, maybe group settings for some people, organizational practices that you can start and try out for a certain amount of time. And then the last thing would be, what are the one-on-one supports that people are getting? Either mentoring, coaching. I heard job shadowing. I love talking about that. People are like, that is so old school. I'm like, if you were a young person who was like, I'll work at McDonald's for the rest of my life, whatever, and then somehow you like found your way into this work, you never got to go look at the things that are out there. You literally don't know anything else but wherever you've been. And so don't knock the old stuff. Sometimes people are like, I don't know if I could sit at a computer for 4 hours every day. I think I will go absolutely insane. But if you never go see it, or if you don't have your staff people go see it, they won't, some of them don't know, and they will not tell you, oh yeah, when I was a teenager, I thought I was going to work at McDonald's for the rest of my life. So I just never went out to see anything else. So, you know, I've just talked to some staff person the other day from an FRC who's like 28. She's an amazing woman, but she's like, I think there might be something else out there. I'm like, sister, there are a lot of other things out there. You just got to go see. And maybe there aren't. And so maybe what's out there is not what she's looking for. And in that case, what is she willing to create? But that takes time. That takes intention on a supervisor or a mentor's part to call that out. So we're not locking people into like, oh, there's one job you could do and it's this. Sit at this computer, do this stuff, talk to these parents, you know, whatever, right? Because if we don't give our folks that opportunity, they'll leave. They'll say, no thanks, I can't do this forever. So even if you lose them, you know, if they go to a place and they're effective because they are getting inspired and trying new things out and learning, at least we kept them in the field and they're not, you know, going to work for the tech company or something. I don't know. Okay, so think about these questions, talk amongst yourselves. We're going to give you a little bit of time because we have it, and then we will turn back to the room to get some sharing. Please.
Just a reminder that there's that parenthesis that says it's okay to self-identify.
Absolutely.
Sure. So
yeah.
we just want to shout it out to everybody in the online community that at the very top of the slide, it's okay to self-identify. And what I would like to ask the group is the opportunity to have one person leave your space and go to another table and be part of another conversation and so to mix it up. So you need to self-identify yourself and go sit at another table. And there you go. This is working. It's working.
Very good, very good. Okay.
Okay. See you in a little, and as far as the online people, we look forward to hearing from you.
So you upgraded the programs and outcomes and accountability. Yeah. They were down here.
About 45 years and everyone in the building and worked my way up into administration. So before they discovered that I was and because I'm bilingual, so it kind of was a so I actually went back to college.
Even if you're not connected to the work that they're doing, you can translate the work they're doing into the
So I and so at a very young age, at 58, I actually switched careers. And so, but my organization had started, I worked for Start Migrant had started, there were always a lot of opportunities with that program. For some, and I worked my way up in the tree. But even within the organization, like, there's people like like at first you get these you get selected, and I figured out to do that to the new people. Yeah, the new people being used for great leadership, you've been selected. Because I'm new and everybody else has done it already, you know, so you learn that really quick. But yeah, I actually learned that my started this position. Equipment, giving training is my boss. learning opportunities. A lot of learning opportunities, and I tease her. Right. To retirement. So, and she says, no, there's no other way, like and even while you're married, maybe I could just, like I still want to do something, and sometimes I like as soon as somebody goes, and I know it's time for but it is kind of fun to be to. I'm grateful that I have always been somewhere where talk about learning opportunities. I have them every day. My daughter asked me last night. She said, "Mom, how can you the right way to ask for a raise? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, is that one step? I had never in my life ever contemplated that. Yeah. Are you serious? It's either. Oh, but I learned that how I teach that. But it's not. First of all, how are you advising getting attended in kind of things? I'm kind of curious, and I didn't ask her. I'll have to ask her today when I talk to her. It's always kind of tough, and that's what our kids are. So then they say, well, the board is great. So I think we're supposed to be talking about like identifying the range to see if emerging talent. So they're going to be, and I actually I'm or maybe when other people go, and she goes, and I go, okay, then I'm okay with that. Because at first it's like, and so to turn that around and realize that you're asking for 2% a year. We're not even at that. It's like there's different elements of positive and negatives, and it's just so when that but it's still a lot to take away from it. A variety of bosses. Some were very good managers. Some were leaders. And it's like, how could you? And I think they have this right. And I did have I don't know if they have that could like, you know, that kind of calls and then calls. But yeah, all these inspired and then when you got to the opposite end, just trouble learning, but sure, you can just right. Your ego is intact and you feel energized by the conversation instead of like, oh my gosh, I just got totally gut like, yeah, sorry, it is advice from yeah. And you'll get more out of it when they feel there's and that's where the reflection is. So instead of like saying something, okay, you say, well, tell me what worked for you, what didn't work, what would you do today? I want to do that again. So you let the person. It's like how they therapy, right? Like therapy will tell you what the issues are. They bring you around them. And I think like you know, like you should have this course because it's like what I already did is so what I should like can we talk about what I learned in this course, what I did, you know, yeah. Yes. So what you're talking about is the application stage. It's about so just in a nutshell, so you have to frame of reference. It's about when you engage with the family. It has everything to do with engaging with their customer and partnering with them and investing or meeting them where they're at to address their safety. It's very focused on safety. So and what can you do to ensure that your child is safe? What are the things that we can as a partnership together work on to make sure your child's safe? And so it's kind of shifting how it's shifting the mentality of the practice. We know that child accounting course here. But all even previously, they were very particular Riverside County is on risk. So that makes that cannot be somewhat of a practice as well. You're going to err on the side of caution here. They're going to remove because there's too much risk going on, and I've seen so many potentials for there being issues in the future. It's kind of like there's never going to be enough to know what that was. You saw the risk, and instead we were going to have a lot of damage to go out and drive the long kids in the side. But I can see how that is my God, you can't do this.
So we want you to pick someone who is going to report out for your table, okay? So pick somebody intentionally so you're not all looking at each other like not it, or, you know, whatever it is that you do. So pick someone, okay? And then we're going to report out in a couple minutes. Okay, so we're going to have Atascadero go first. We're going to have them report out first, and I think we're going to get them up on the screen. There they are.
Hi. So I guess what I kind of would like to focus on is the qualities of the leaders we see in our community and what they show. I think we see open to learning as a quality in a leader, excited and passionate, encouraging, communication, that they're patient, and they're good at everything, just a little bit of everything, and they use active listening, and they're really non-biased in their listening. Also that they're open to others' ideas, open to failing and resilient to recover, and allowing and growing from mistakes.
Thank you. Other thoughts from your group work or your discussion?
We just really focused on the qualities and what we saw in the leaders in our communities, and so we really elaborated on the qualities.
Okay, great.
Hi, Gwen. It's Natalie Stetz. Can you think of any needs that these leaders have at this time? I know it's not something you discussed, but is there an unmet need that any of you observe? Whether it's for training, emotional support, you know, career advancement opportunity, you know, any of the above.
You know, something that came up earlier in the day is taking time for ourselves and really doing the self-care measures and just remembering. I mean, we're encouraged to do that. It's hard to remember to do that. And so I think the support of actually taking the time to really do those self-help measures. And I think ongoing support is something that is always needed for emerging leaders.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Natalie, if on the chart we could put the self-help, and maybe if we could, you know, if we wrap this part, we can come back to some Q&A stuff. Because I have one thought that I shared with one table before lunch about the self-care piece that's structural that we don't talk about. Okay, thank you, Atascadero. So let's have our tables share out. And again, I hope you picked a reporter, so you're not, you know, not it. Yeah.
Tiffany, here we go. Hi, this is Tiffany. That's all I have to say. Okay, so we some of the strengths that I think most of them were mine, but some of the other ones that were thrown in were restorative skills, social skills, having that emotional intelligence, knowing that having that care and compassion for your staff, your employee, having the skills and the knowledge of their roles as well as of the leaders' roles as well as their staff's roles, being trainable as well as being able to teach others. And then also, Ray brought up the critical thinking aspect, being able to bridge the gap between resources and what you're lacking. And then we went on to a further discussion about how to retain emerging leaders. And that we don't want to talk
That is not gonna, that's
okay.
not going outside
Yeah.
the room.
Okay. So we had a discussion about that. And I will pass the mic on.
Gabriela Alonso, and some of the things that we talked about in our table were challenges, maybe with the generational gaps that we have in our staff, and but everything is dependent on the confidence that we build in our employees. I think when you have really young employees, building their confidence to ensure that they see the leadership skills in themselves, and also when you have the baby boomers, they might not feel that it's too late in their career to take on a different role or a leadership role. But I think just ensuring that they know that you trust them and that you have confidence in their skills. I think that's really critical. Francisco also talked about leadership and parents. I think all of us in our roles really want to ensure that the families that we're working with are leaders themselves, because we're not going to be able to provide services for them forever, but we really want them to take on the leadership roles in their families and advocacy skills. So building upon our leaders, not just focusing on our staff and ourselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm Larry. We talked about a person that works for the FRCs right now that I feel could be or should be an emerging leader. One of the strengths I thought that set her apart from a lot of other people is the attitude she has. She came to the Desert Hot Springs FRC under what could have been tenuous conditions, but it didn't slow her down. She's never had less than professional conduct all the time. She's always had a good attitude. Single mom, 2 kids, middle school and elementary school. So that's got to make it tough right there, but nothing slowed her down. What we need to do is make sure that we keep her challenged and help her figure out what it is she wants to do. The good thing about being at the FRC is that you get to learn about a lot of different positions in the county, a lot of different organizations in the community, and it can help her get a better idea of which way she wants to go. And then we can make sure she has the job skills to do that.
So this is Judy Sherman. I just want to add, this wasn't actually part of our conversation, but the word that came up to me is entrepreneurial. And I think when we think about an entrepreneur, we think about somebody who is a business person, right? But when I think about an entrepreneur, I think about somebody who activates change rather than waiting for change to come to them. And it's really more of a mindset than a sector, right? And that they're it's kind of a mindset that is critically questions things that they come up, doesn't take things just as they are, has curiosity, wonders why, wants to move things forward in sometimes innovative ways, sometimes just building on things that exist. So I think for me that really captures the spirit of leadership. And if you're able to create an environment that people can work like that, can act like that, then you've already started to create an environment where leadership can emerge. Thank you, Judy. I'm going to walk to the front here and look at this table. And
This is Michelle again. One of the things that we had discussed at the table is kind of just like a challenge to developing leadership, at least in our organization in the past. And some of the folks in the room may be familiar with the phrase, when you're a social worker and you do a good job, oftentimes if you promote, they say, oh, I can't believe they let you out of the field. Because you've done such a good job, they want you to stay where you're at. Thankfully, I think our organization is kind of moving away from that mentality and starting to identify people. There's opportunities to, maybe there may not be an opportunity for someone to promote into a different position, but keeping your staff engaged and building skills that are maybe ancillary to what they do so that they have those opportunities, because it's all about keeping people engaged, right? So it's a parallel process. We have to keep our staff engaged if we want them to engage with our clients and with our families. And we have to stay engaged with them in order to be able to provide them with the support. We talked a little bit about some of the qualities that good leaders have. It was mentioned that sometimes you have people that have really great management skills and do a great job managing, but they're not necessarily good leaders. And then sometimes you have people that are exceptional leaders, but not that great at managing. And so what does it look like when those two worlds meet? And just talking about people that have an openness to learn, to take on challenges. Those are some of the qualities. I think we said like tenacity and just people that don't give up really and that keep trying and learning as they go. Those are some of the qualities that we identified as being necessary for good leadership.
Thank you. So Esco, do you want to close out?
Yeah, Natalie had suggested.
Oh, hold on. Oh, sorry. You're not.
Great.
Oh.
I wanted Neil to unmute, but anyway.
Did he send it directly to you?
He sent it directly to me. Yeah.
Oh. Can we just take the mic out, Carrie?
Translation.
For those of you on the online and remote site, Carrie Collins just flagged that we have a online question that she has that we will now read.
All right, Neil, I'm going to read your question out loud now. And I can't see this. Right here. Yeah.
So the comment from Neil is, they're interesting conversations. It sounds like this has tapped into a useful issue for the participants. So my question is, how do those folks go home and begin to raise these ideas and these changes and individuals or in individuals?
Yes. So one of the things, that exact question is what we want to leave you with as a takeaway and homework, basically. Today was not necessarily to figure that out, because again, we're just shifting the lens a little bit so that you could think together. And the lovely part of today is that a lot of you are working in similar FRCs, so you can take this back together, and or you have kind of this, this bigger department that you can lean on within Riverside County to be able to do this. And so you have now this collective room of people that went through this experience today together to be able to, bounce ideas on and off from. But part of, learning is first just like, what are we even talking about? And are we on the same page about what we're talking about? And then how do we go back and apply? And so we're going to leave that as the challenge and request back to you all about how do you want to take this outside of this room and then start thinking about it so that in your next learning communities for Southern California and strategies, that some of those topics can come up and that the follow-up can happen in rooms like this ongoing. Natalie had mentioned that maybe there were some questions people wanted to ask. I mean, Neil asked one, but are there any other questions from this group about things you've heard today from each other, from the amazing women who are with strategies who have a plethora of knowledge, from me? Are there anything? Oh, yes, sorry, we're going to have to.
mic everyone.
I didn't have a question, but I wanted to share, and maybe Michelle, you can confirm. I was asking Larry if he remembered the percentage of attrition rate that we had this past year has significantly gone down. I think it used to be in the 30%, and now it's in the teens, right? 9?
Wow.
Are you kidding? Oh my gosh, I'm even happier now. Which speaks to the culture shift that we've had ever since we've embedded our strength builders into our culture. And that's very encouraging to see that retention is actually working because we're adding value to staff. And I was sharing that our neighboring counties have very competitive salary rates, and they used to leave because they got better pay. Well, now they're not leaving. And I'm wondering, they're not leaving because of job satisfaction, because of valuing that they're receiving from the strength focus that we're giving to staff. So really, we're currently in a culture of focusing on staff. What do staff need to do this work? And it's not just the field staff. It's not just managerial or supervisory. It's drilled all the way down to the beginning stages of employment here. And so it's very encouraging to share that because data speaks. It tells us stuff about how we're shifting cultures. So I wanted to share that with you.
Great, thank you. All right.
Thanks, Monique. Sure.
Just to piggyback on that, I think one of the things that has happened recently in Riverside County that has been helpful in shifting some of that loss of staff is that we're now starting to be more aware of trauma-informed care, ACEs, how those things impact our workforce. I know we've had some discussion about it, but since this is an area that I'm passionate about, I thought I'd take a minute to plug it. So a lot of people that entered the helping profession come from a place of trauma. Right. It's something that's been widely ignored or kind of kept quiet, and now it's starting to really come to light. And I think the better we get at addressing it, kind of letting it out and doing a better job as an organization, because in child welfare particularly, not only do oftentimes people come with trauma, so they don't even call it secondary trauma anymore for that, because you're coming with your own trauma, right. And then your exposure to trauma is heightened, and then heaven forbid you have exposure to critical incidences, so you're experiencing firsthand trauma. There is just trauma upon trauma upon trauma, and we haven't in the past done a very good job at helping each other get through that. And now I think we're in a place as a county, and it's a county-wide initiative. It's not just children's services, but we are starting to look at that with a very real purpose of how can we do better? How can we provide the support to our staff and to one another? And it starts by leading by example. And I think that that's one of the things that I didn't mention before when we were talking about leadership, is that oftentimes the leaders are the ones that are running the fastest on the hamster wheel. And sometimes you need to show in your leadership the example of self-care and make sure that your staff, so you're not just preaching it to them, but that you're actually leading by example. So
why don't we take a second to address this, because I've heard it almost in some way at every single one of the tables that I joined, and then I think we flagged it earlier because we were hearing it in the room. And so, for a while, the self-care and the trauma-informed care piece was like all the rage. And, for our organization that is absolutely working with people that have their own trauma that matches very much up with the trauma that they're seeing with their participants and their families, our organization had to take some very direct actions to make sure that those things were addressed head on. And so we always had a thing called clinical supervision, where we had a licensed therapist come in, and differently than the reflection model that you see, because our staff received that as a space once a month. This was a very specific space around having a clinician come in to hear about the different things that were triggering people, and then a way to kind of, figure out, okay, what do you do with that? What is in the way? Like, how do we look at this from a very specific mental health model? And so we have used clinical supervision for probably the whole time of our organization, which has been about 14 years. So that's one, and it's a group setting. And what would happen if there's an individual who were like, uh-oh, sounding real bad, is how do we support that person to then go get their own support, utilizing our healthcare and whatever else to be able to get themselves their own mental health therapy if it seems like it's going down the road of like, wow, this person's really in bad shape. So that's one avenue. The second one is with all the trauma-informed care practices that we started off with, and again, this was primarily with our emancipated foster youth staff and their young people. We have been going and going with the ACEs pieces and all these different things. And one of the things we were introduced to was something called a personal acute safety plan. And so we started those probably about a year and a half ago. And then in October, because our headquarter offices are in Napa and Sonoma County, we have those terrible fires, insane. I mean, I was asleep in Richmond, which is 40 miles away. I could smell it at 12 o'clock at night. My children who go to school in Richmond could not go to school, and that's 40 miles away. So you can imagine what it was like in the city of Napa. I mean, the place looked like a war zone. It was insane. And so that brought up all kinds of things for everyone, all of our staff, all of our families that were already in bad shape who are now in worse shape because they can't work. Most of them were not burned out of their houses. They just couldn't go to work. And it was the end of harvest season for the wine, for the wine grapes. So it was like heavy season, people wanting those extra shifts, all of that stuff. So lots of lost wages, all of those things. And so, it told us at that moment in time for this one particular incident, anything it can happen in this world these days, right? Human or natural driven, whatever, disasters. And so we had luckily already instituted all these things around having these different things in place for our staff people to really make sure they took care of themselves. And that just expedited that process, that fire. We were like, if you don't have a personal acute safety plan, you better get one on paper, and then you better talk to our clinical supervision person about what it will look like in practice. I was sharing with this table over here, we have an amazing executive director. She succeeded our founder. She's a young person. She's younger than me. She's go, go, go all the time. And so when it was time for her to do her plan, you would think she'd be like, woohoo. She was like, no, I don't want to do it. We were like, what? What do you mean you don't want to do it? So this whole leading by example, it wasn't that she didn't believe in it. For whatever reasons, her own stuff, especially after this fire, were just so thick. And so how our executive staff, it's like 3 women, me being one of my executive staff. I'm like, whatever. We sit around in the board, the conference room with the chairs that don't match and the table that's broken. That's our executive staff. So, we really pushed hard on like, no, if you're sick, you are going to stay home. And a lot of crying and yelling at each other about like, no, your staff, all these people are watching us right now. And if we don't take care of ourselves, how are they going to take care of themselves? And then how are they going to impress upon these families that they have to take care of themselves first? Like the fire brought up all this stuff about like life can be burned up like real quick. So let's not play around and act like we have all this time to be, messing with ourselves. We are the vehicles to help support many people. And so, I just think some of those things, again, a year and a half ago, they were like, it's a piece of paper with like, let me go do yoga every, other week or something. And after that fire, I was like, nope. Am I drinking enough water? Am I sleeping at night? Or am I like staying up to watch mindless TV that I don't need to watch? I mean, all these things that, again, we think about, or I would think about it in a fleeting moment, but putting it on paper and then being held to it in a group setting and kind of, helping each other figure out what is it really? Is it really yoga, or is it really that after that hard thing that happened with this parent that you need to just go talk to somebody for 10 minutes to figure out what to do about it? And so I urge you, if you don't have concrete things in place for this self-care piece, people will just think like, I see everybody carrying their water bottle around, but I want to drink Diet Pepsi, every 5 minutes. So whatever, I think that there's still some staff that you really have to be thinking about, okay, how do we make this a practice that is saying to them, no, we want you to invest in yourself. We can't do it for you. You are the only one who can do this. So how do we put in the structures so we have those conversations in an intervaled way throughout the year? And then how do you support people who really just struggle with it? Because, all of us have self-care defined very differently, given our, backgrounds or whatever has happened in the past. So that is my plug, because yeah, I wasn't always a believer, and I am like, go, like put the plan in place, do it, go back and look at it, give people the space and time to think about it and be together around it. Other questions, comments? This room is full of extra smart and driven people. I have been sitting at every table or, got around to different people, and it's been a pleasure to hear what's going on with the newness in this transition for your own department and stuff. And so it's been really fascinating just to see all the new things that are popping up and the thoughts that you're having around those new things. So I appreciated all the sharing. Yeah.
So from the Atascadero site, they are asking if there is a form of the personal acute safety plan that they can get.
There is, and I can share that. It's super simple. Some people don't like it, but you'll get the idea if you get it. You could totally modify it. Again, our clinical supervisor has used it with us, and again, some people love it, some people hate it, but yeah, I can send that out as a resource along with some of the other things that we've had today. Okay, I think what we're going to do at this point is transition back to Lisa and talk a little bit about where you have been as a learning community on the whole, and then close it up.
Yeah, we're going to close it up a little early here. I know you're disappointed. So what I'd like to do is first, I want to thank the Office of Child Abuse Prevention for making it possible for us to develop what we call a learning community. And I'm going to also thank Monique and Gabriella. You introduced me to Monique and Loretta, and for buying into the vision of what we talked about on the phone and created today. And from that, I look forward to building upon not just today, but to go down some memory lane here a little bit about how we got to this day. So first, if you don't know this is a Strategies 2.0 project, you know it. And I'm sure I've heard that many, many times over the day, that this is a resource to us tomorrow and the next day, and also to you here in Riverside. And I know you have used strategies in the past, but also the Strategies 2.0 is the new generation of doing this work. I look forward to connecting to you through this resource in the coming days. So remember, it's a catalyst for the professional skills that we're working on, developing organizational structures and community relationships to our organization. So we have the skills and to mitigate the risk factors of child abuse and neglect, but most importantly, that we're here promoting child, family, and community well-being by developing their resilience, recovering from trauma, all of those important frameworks that we're talking about today, about how we go from a very tragic situation and grow to be high functioning and strong people that we are, and we are as a species, as a human species. We're quite remarkable that way. So our next slide is just to confirm how a learning community is different from a training. And when we first launched this process a year and a half, or it's been 2 years now. So this is very new when you think about it, that we're really looking to improve our ways of how we cross our partnerships. Now, for instance, Gabriella, you're here from a school district, right? We have a lot of folks here from the county Department of Social Services culture. But today I'm representing a nonprofit. I'm not from Riverside, but I am your colleague, and I'm your counterpart in the work in San Luis Obispo County. And when Gabriella and I first met, we wanted to, she can feel like an island. She's isolated in her work, partly because of it's a different cultural, or it's a different organization. So thank you for being here today, sitting with the county folks that are here today. And increasing leadership capacity is what a purpose of a learning community we see is so necessary. That's partly why we have ESCO here today. That's what's made us go in this direction. And also, we want to be innovative. And I know, Larry, you and I were sitting here at a table. We talked a little bit about the system of the county and how that can sometimes keep that creative spark from happening as you evolve and grow. But we want to use this learning community forum to help us spark that innovative thinking when you go back to work. And also, I'm hearing this from everybody today, that you are creating positive change here in Riverside. I go back in San Luis Obispo, I feel like I'm leading creative change, but it's so cool to come and connect from our different communities and see each other in our like-minded work. And it just empowers me to go back and feel a little stronger, a little more confident about the leadership role that I provide, and also to grow that in my community. And I see that here in this room today. So, see that bottom green part? So, Office of Child Abuse Prevention, back when they funded this project that we call Strategies 2.0, this is what came out of that planning discussion. And I am part of you, like you are part of me, in the Southern California region. We are so huge geographically. And a reminder that over 5 million children in this region are here. And we really outpace with those numbers the rest of the state in many ways. But also, we are our colleagues, as you can see in different colors, there are 6 learning communities. So San Luis Obispo being right up here, somehow we skipped Kern, but we're in there with you. And I just, again, when I started this process of doing this thing called a learning community with Strategies 2.0, I called Natalie up. I said, I've been working with Natalie for a long time. Jump in with me and we're going to do this. And I'm going to show you, I think it's in the next slide, is what our very first one was. Oh, maybe it's not. But no, that's what it was when we were in Ventura. We were in Ventura when we did the very first one. And this is what we heard from the field, from the people, that there was an increased need for knowledge and information about how we do collaborative work across sectors, even amongst ourselves internally. What are the models that are successful? What are the strategies and practices that drive collaborative work? And how do we be mindful of organizational development? We talked about personal development, we talked about leadership development, but also structurally, what we need to do better as organizations in our cultural organizational work to support the services that we provide. From there, in September of 2017, this was our second one, we featured Dr. Ann Light. She is a medical director at the Orange County Department of Social Services, and she organizes what they call the We Can Coalition. Some of you joined us on that day. There were fires. There were fires that day, I remember. They kept folks from joining us in Anaheim. And but we did have great participation online. Yes, you were, and I really appreciate that you were, because that's what brought me to you when we were planning this next series. But we want to understand what brings your partners to the table, is what we discussed with Dr. Ann Light talked about. It's not so much about pointing people because they have a title, and you get to come here to this table because you have this title, but also seeking passion rather than position for your engagement at this coalition, and also identifying those with influence, really going after those, maybe those legislative leaders, or those local school superintendents is one example, and learn what they're passionate about and harness into that. I mean, I can think of someone in my community, and it's our superintendent of County Office of Education. I tap into him because I see he has the leadership that I need to help grow family resource centers. So it's not just a government agency approach or a school-based approach. It's also a community-based approach. So, and he's been very helpful that way. So in December of 2017, Now, there was a fire again, and in Ventura County. Again, I know the Napa fires were really huge, but I remember I had to drive down the 101, go through Santa Barbara and Ventura, and there was fires all along the ridge line there by the ocean. It was quite beautiful, but at the same time, dangerous. And I remember folks going, "You're crazy. Why are you driving down to Los Angeles to do this thing called Strategies 2.0?" And you know what? I just believe so much in this project that I went, and I'll tell you what, there was no cars on the road, so it was great. The traffic was like, whoo. So anyway, it's interesting. The fires unite us a little bit in our. So we featured Safe Long Beach. They are an incredible collaborative model that if you haven't been able to learn about it yet, is that webinar up on our strategy site yet? I'm checking in. I don't think it is. It's supposed to be archived up eventually. But even just be aware of them. You can Google it and see who they are and what they're doing in the city of Long Beach. It's incredible work. It's collaborative work. It's complex work. And they spent time, talking about data sharing. Monique mentioned about data, how important it is. It is important, but we got to see ways to cross the data between agencies. Building relationships between the different systems, that like really knowing our sheriff, really knowing who our law enforcement people are, and who are the champions in that, and also committed visionary leadership. Again, I know we keep being a little redundant about the leadership, but it's also a key in moving these collaboratives forward. That's what Safe Long Beach spent the day with us talking about their model. Okay. So we're going to skip ahead really fast over many, many slides, which you have in your handout, but now it's all over the place up here. So I want to close with this. We are doing our final, not our final, but our final learning community for this year on June 21st. And we're doing it at the California Endowment. We will offer remote sites and online opportunities. But what's going to be a little different about this one is it's going to be shorter. We're not going to go beyond the 12 o'clock or 12:30 hour. It's going to be shorter. And I've invited Jose Ramos, who is I don't know what his title is. What is he? Prevention Director at the Children's Bureau of Southern California. And anyway, he has agreed to join us on that day because Children's Bureau is one of the partners in Strategies 2.0 and making it possible. And so stay tuned. If you can join us by online or in person, that's great. But I just want you to know that's our thought for that. And from what we learned from this past year and a half to today is how we're going to build the next series of learning communities. And you could host a remote site here, Monique and David. You could, if you wish to be part of that day, if it works. From their own desk. Oh, that's a good point. Monique was sharing with us that having Riverside staff participating from their unique area, because we forget how big Riverside is. I know San Bernardino is bigger when it comes to land, but it's big down here. All right. Yes. And Lydia's going to talk. I'm going to hand the mic. Thank you.
Well, as you know, Strategies provides training, consulting, and peer learning and development. Can you hear me in the back? Trainings that we provide can include trauma-informed care. We also have a really nice training that a lot of folks are starting to ask for about ACEs and how to build community resilience. So that's a great training as well that we've done. And coming up on Friday, June 8th, we'd like to promote this event, Introduction to Two Generation Programs with Todd Sosna. That will be at the Children's Bureau Magnolia Place location from 9:30 to 12. I know that I've heard Todd is a wonderful speaker, and he's going to talk a lot about
you can provide 2-generational support. And for those of you who are like, what's 2-generational support? 2-generational support is when programs provide support for parents or caregivers and also for children. So that's going to be something. There's another thing that I wanted to share with you. The governor has released monies for a home visiting program for family resource centers. So they're accepting RFPs, and I have a flyer here that I'm going to share with everyone. Please do not judge my desktop. This is how I don't lose stuff. I took off the cat pictures because it didn't look that professional. Okay. That's okay. It's trustworthy. Okay. So this is, oh my, I don't know if we can see it all. Let's see if I can make it a little bit smaller for us. Oh, maybe it needs to be even smaller than that. Is that too small? Can we see it okay? Oh, too small. Okay. I'll make it bigger. And I'll just read it. So, the Child Abuse Prevention Center and California Family Resource Association would like your community, FRC, and networks to learn about this opportunity for funding that will be available to counties in July that will invest in California's children and families. The CalWORKS branch of the California Department of Social Services will be investing in a 3-year home visiting initiative. Organizations that currently have home visitation programs or are interested in starting one may be eligible to draw on state funding. So on June 14th, there will be an informational webinar that's hosted by Child Abuse Prevention Center and CFRA. And so the total budget is $158.5 million over 3 years. And the CDSS will release requests for county proposals July 2018. We can send this flyer to you so that you can look at it and decide if that's something you're interested in. Okay? And also for our online participants, we'll attach that to all the information that we're sending as well. Okay?
All right. So guess what? This is the end of our day. Again, thank you to our host here at Riverside. This was an exceptional place to be with you today. When the opportunity came to plan for this, I was just very keen in coming out here because I want personally to connect with folks in this region of the county, of the state. So thank you for letting me come into your community. And in closing, we have evaluations. So don't forget your evaluations and please fill them out. Also, we have extra food. Don't be shy. Please feel free to take a box home, David. I know you're a young man. He can take 2 boxes. I know. It's easier if you take it than we do. And thank you for being with us. And I look forward to reconvening with you again. Goodbye, Atascadero. And goodbye to our online participants. Thank you for being with us.